March is Brain Injury Awareness Month, and now is the time to get up to speed on the symptoms because a recent survey found 50% of people who experience a possible concussion don't even get it checked out. Joining us now is Dr. Beth McQuiston, the medical director in Abbott's Diagnostics business, and Kathy Derringer, president of the National Athletic Trainers Association, to share what parents and coaches need to know about concussions and why you should never just walk it off. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Yeah, so Dr. Beth, we'll start with you. This survey from your newly formed Concussion Awareness Coalition found that 1 in 2 concussions are ignored. I find that unbelievable, but they are being ignored. Explain why you think that this is and why it's important to know the signs.
Sure. First of all, concussions are usually not planned. So people aren't anticipating they're going to hit their head that day. And concussions can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. And then when you couple that with the fact that when you injure your brain, you can't see that you've injured your brain, and frequently people don't know what the signs and symptoms of concussion are. If someone twists their ankle, they can see that their ankle's swollen and they can feel that. But I can tell you as a neurologist, it's hard for people to realize that they've had a concussion. We did a survey of 1,000 adults across the United States, and what we found is that 8 out of 10 adults don't know what the most common signs and symptoms of concussion are.
So we want to get into that, but March is also National Athletic Training Month, and many people associate concussions with sports. Kathy, what should parents and coaches know to help protect the kids out there?
That we have about 300,000 concussions that happen to high school and collegiate athletes every year. And the most important question for parents is who's taking care of those student athletes. Athletic trainers have the knowledge, the educational background, and the expertise to recognize and manage those concussions, but they have to be there. And we know that 1/3 of high schools across the country don't have access to athletic trainers. So parents, I would encourage you to ask your school administrators, who's taking care of my athlete should a concussion occur?
Wow, be an advocate for your student athlete. How do concussions usually happen, and are there some myths out there that you all can bust for us?
Well, the number one cause is because of slips and falls, and then the second would be motor vehicle accidents, although sports play an important part with concussions as well. And in terms of myths, there are a number of myths. One would be that you have to lose consciousness to have a concussion, and that's not true. The vast majority of people that have a concussion don't lose consciousness. Number two, we know that people think that you have to have a body blow in order to have a concussion, and that's not true either. You can actually sustain a concussion from, for example, whiplash, when your head goes forward and back, and you haven't hit your head at all. And then Kathy?
And I would add to that people believe that you can't go to sleep if you have a concussion. And that's not true either. As long as you are evaluated by a healthcare professional, you do need to rest and allow that brain to heal. And finally, there is a myth that males sustain concussions more often than females, and actually the opposite is true. 2 to 3 times females are having concussions over men. So making sure that we're treating every patient as an individual and recognizing those signs and symptoms is very important.
This is great information. Beth and Kathy, thanks so much for sharing it with us today on Studio 3.
Sure, and for more information, please go to concussionawarenessnow.org. Stay tuned because we have a PSA coming out later this month.
Wonderful, thank you. Again, such important information, and while we were watching that, you said you remember from cheerleading days having some head injuries.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that is a very intense sport, you know, and for anybody familiar with it, when you're stunting, you know, you're putting girls up in the air, you know, the mentality is you don't let anybody hit the floor, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, I had a few, and I mean, it was very critical because I remember my doctor, you know, keeping a close eye on me even in the days after, you know, and I just can't tell you enough. I mean, as far as awareness, to know those signs and those symptoms and immediately seek treatment. You know, because you don't want to let that go.
Right, like their report, they were talking about a lot of people just ignore it or just walk it off, or oh, it wasn't anything big. But don't do that. I know when we had the cheerleaders in here recently and they did their big stunt, you and I were both a little nervous because you said, I know what can happen if you fall. And but they were pros. The middle school cheerleaders that were here about a week or so ago.
There are lots of contact sports, though. You know what I mean, and you just really have to keep a close eye on them. You know, because if you take hit after hit after hit, you know, and I mean, you look at all the studies that are being done on even pro football players and some of those long-term effects. So it can be very serious. So don't just walk it off or try to sleep it off. You know, make sure that you are seeking immediate treatment, whether it's you or whether it's your kid that's involved in sports.